Hello, welcome to the data channel, and you're watching data model masterclass series. And as part of this series, we are bringing up the next video, next content, that is where exactly and how exactly the data model fit in different software development or product development lifecycle, right? Because when you consider when you want to build any product or any software, especially a software product or a project, if you're working or if you want to build any project, software project, right? So then you have couple of options, like say for example, you might choose any of these options, right? Like we will see these details, but you can choose to have process driven, data driven, object oriented, prototyping, and agile, right? So whatever the approach, the development approach you choose, and in how the data modeling fit into all of these, right? Because so data model is not a is not like a design specific or any approach specific, right? So it doesn't matter which approach you are following, which software development approach from this list you are following, right? So data model will be applicable in entire life cycle of the project, right? So that we will see in detail with examples. So before proceeding, if you are new to this channel, we would recommend you to please subscribe and also press bell button for instant notifications. So let's get started. So as I said, like data model plays important role basically in software or product development life cycle, and the different approaches of software development, let understand. So first is a process driven approach. So next we have a data driven approach. So then we have parallel or mixed of these two, right? Like process driven and data driven, we call it as a parallel or blended approach. It's a combination of first two. And then you have an object oriented approach, and then you have prototyping approach, and finally famous agile method or agile approach. So what we follow in software development life cycle, right? So these are the high level questions, high level approaches basically, and we need to get answer for the question like how exactly the data model fit into these all of these approaches. So that's what we are going to see in this video. So to start with, right? So process driven approach. So process driven approach, so you can consider like anything like a waterfall model, for example, right? So if you have a waterfall model, like where emphasize a linear progression through a defined phases like requirement gathering and design and implementation, testing and maintenance. See, waterfall model, as you might already know, so it is actually a sequential, or we can call it as a linear progression method, where exactly you kind of define the requirements prior to the development. So you freeze the all the requirements, right? And then you start the development. So that is what we call as a data, like we call it as a waterfall model, right? And in this, like there are different phases, as you can see, and so these are the different phases, right? And the data model plays a crucial role in design phase, where they help define the structure and relationship of the data that will be used within the system. See, like consider like a process driven approach, you consider as a waterfall model, right? And so you have all these steps, right? Like requirement gathering, system design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. So data model in each of these phases of the project, whether you're when you're using process driven approach, like is crucial in design phase, where they help define. So especially in the design phase, it is very crucial, and where they help define the structure, right? And the relationship between the data. And here data model is will not be much used in the further steps, because it is a linear progression. Because once the like in as part of system design, the data model is designed or finalized, so there is no much scope of the data model except in the system design phase, right? And let's take an example of it. So like there is a suppose you want to like you are developing an online bookstore application user using a waterfall model. Like, so in this case, like requirement gathering would be that the project team interviews the stakeholders, including bookstore owners or potential users, to gather the requirements. They document features and users authentication, browsing and searching for the books. So you can consider like adding books to the shopping cart and checking out and payment gateway, etc. Right? And coming to the system design, you can consider like based on the requirements, the team designs the architecture of the web application. They decide which technology they can be used, such as backend framework. So which backend framework and which is the front end framework they need to use for the UI, and they also design the database schema to store the information about books, users, orders, etc. Right? So that is where you kind of use the data model here. So when you ask where exactly data model fit into the process driven approach when you're considering water model, so it will fit into the system design phase, so where they are actually designing. And so even in the implementation stage, data model will be still used, even though the developers begin to create or build the components and of the web application and based on the design specification. So they create modules for user authentication and whatnot, right? Based on the system design. Okay, so whatever the data model which is created in the system design will be used in all the different phases, but mainly it is if you talk about the scope, it is in the system design phase, right? So let's move on to the data driven approach. So data driven approach is little different than process driven approach, right? Software development in this case prioritize the deriving insights and making decisions based on data analysis. See, in the previous case it was not a data project, right? So it was just a process project, like you want to build a web application, right? But here there might be a project where the emphasis is on the data analysis and the project itself is a data project. So these methodologies emphasize organizing, analyzing, and leveraging the data to drive the decision making and problem solving. So here everything revolves around the data, right? And if you see what are the different phases, right? So data collection, integration, analysis, ingestion, insight generations, strategy implementations, performance monitoring, and iterative improvements. So these will be the phases, right? And so let's consider an example here. The company wants to optimize its marketing campaign to increase sales. So this is a project, and like here, what we'll do is imagine a company wants to optimize its marketing company campaigns to increase sales. So they decide to adopt a data-driven approach to analyze customer behavior and preferences to their customized needs and based on their marketing strategies, right? And when you talk about data collection, the company might start collecting data from various sources such as customer transaction, website interactions, social media engagements, and demographic informations. And when you talk about integration, right? So next, they integrate and consolidate the data collected into a data repository such as data warehouse or big data. Data model plays again a crucial role here, right? In defining the structure and relationship. So here, when you're collecting the data, it's just a requirement, right? But when you start integrating the data, when you start tying the bits and pieces that you collected the information in the first step, so here is where the data model plays a crucial role, because here is where in defining the structure and relationship between the data and how they actually related to each other, and what are the constraints, like how do you derive the data quality checks, all those will come into picture, and to ensure consistency and facilitate the analysis. So then next in the data analysis phase also, right? If you talk about with the integrated data in place, the company performs in-depth analysis using statistical techniques, machine learning, and whatnot, right? And then they try to uncover some pattern, trends, and insights. And data model guides this analysis by providing a framework for organizing and representing the data, such as dimension data models for analyzing sales performance by product, by region, and by time, etc. Right? So that's where again the data model comes into picture. And when you talk about insight generations, right? So based on the analysis, the company generates actionable insights about customer preference, buying behavior, and effective marketing channels. So these insights inform decision making and strategy development for optimizing marketing campaigns. And the next is strategy implementation. So again here data models continue to play a role in structuring and organizing the data used in executing these strategies, right? So the strategy might be like data analysis. The company implements targeted marketing strategies, which are specific to customer segment, product category, or geographic regions, etc. Right? And when it comes to performance monitoring, so it can be based on certain KPIs such as sales revenue, customer engagement, and conversion rates. So data model again enable here to track consistency and measure of these KPIs by defining relevant metrics and data structures. So again, iterative improvements based on ongoing performance monitoring and feedback, the company iteratively improves its marketing strategies and tactics. Data models evolve alongside these changes. So here in this step, right, so iterative improvements, the data model keeps evolving. That means it keeps adjusting to the changes, reflecting the updates to the data structures, metrics, and analytical approach to the support the continue improvement effort. Right. So in this particular example, data model serves as a foundation for organizing, analyzing, and leveraging the data to drive marketing campaign optimization. So here they ensure that the data is structured in a way that enables meaningful analysis and make informed decisions. Ultimately, what we need is to have a effective and targeted marketing efforts. So this is how the data model fits into all of these categories when you talk about data driven approach. With that, we move to the next one, which is a parallel and or we can call it as a blended approach. So this is again a combination of elements from both process-driven and data-driven methodologies. So this is a hybrid, what we can say, and here the data models are integrated into various stages of development process, ensuring the data requirements are considered along the project aspects like design and testing. Basically, like whatever you see in the so you see the data collection integration and all of these steps, right? And along with that, so you need to consider the process driven steps, so all of these steps, so all of these steps combined will be used in the like this blended approach. And let's like if you consider blended approach, so these approach often integrate aspects of both process and data driven methodologies. So here why we are doing this blended approach is to have that flexibility, agility, and efficiency. And if you talk about example, so you want to create a like a e-commerce platform, right? And the project team decides to adopt a parallel approach that combines element of both process driven and data driven approach. So again here we might have requirement gathering, system design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. But like as we said, it is a blended approach, so the parallel approach combines both the methodologies. And here data model plays a again central role throughout the development life cycle, from the requirement gathering to maintain and ensure that the platform effectively manages and leverages the data to drive business outcomes. And next is the object oriented. So object oriented, like many of you might be familiar with the object oriented programming, but here we are talking about object oriented, like building a project in object oriented manner, right? So here object-oriented approach is again one of the software development approach where we use a UML kind of a modeling, data modeling. So data modeling can be different kinds of data models, right? So here we are talking about when you talk about projects which are object-oriented. So usually data model will be created using a unified modeling language and focus on modeling systems based on objects and their interactions, right? And data models in these approach often take the form of a class diagram. So that means why when you talk about object oriented, right? So everything is it will become an object. So you need to have a class diagram. So that's where how you represent the UML. So where classes represent the entities, that means tables. If you talk about the in the database language in the system, and their attributes map to the data elements, right? Attributes in the sense like if you talk about database, it's a columns, right? And in this particular object oriented approach, how do you design or build a project which is object oriented, right? So these are the steps you need to consider when you're building the object oriented approach, like project which is based on the object oriented approach, right? So first thing is definitely you will have object oriented analysis, because see here everything should be object oriented. So when you say object oriented, so what that means is say you have library management system. Let's take an example. So in the library management system, let's imagine developing a library management system using a object-oriented approach. So the system allows user to borrow, like return or search books in the library collection, right? So here is how the data like models fit into, right? So like example, object-oriented analysis, what it does is the development process begins with object-oriented analysis, where the system requirements are analyzed to identify the objects and their attributes and also their behavior. So data models are used to represent the entities and relationship in the library management system, like such as there might be books, like transactions, libraries, branches, etc. Right? And for example, classes like you can consider book, transaction, and whatever entities that we defined as a classes here and are identified as classes along with their attributes and methods, right? And like when you talk about object oriented design, so again design is also object oriented, right? In this phase, the system architecture and the class diagram, class structures, that UML what we are talking about are planned based on the analysis that we have done in the previous step. So data model guides the design of class diagrams which represent the relationship and interaction between the various objects in the system. For instance, the class diagram may depict association between book and maybe transaction, or like objects like uh, tracking book loans, as well as a, like if you talk about inheritance hierarchy for different types of books, for example fictional books, non-fictional books, you can categorize that, which you can represent the hierarchy there, right? So again, implementation. During implementation, the developers translate the design specification into the executable code. Data model informs the creation of database schema and object-oriented relationship mapping here. Like for example, the class attribute in the data model corresponds to a table in a column, a table columns in the database schema, right? And ORM frameworks, object relationship modeling frameworks like Hibernate or Entity Framework facilitates data access and manipulation operations, right? And finally, you start programming, right? Like object-oriented programming, like principle are applied to implement the behavior of individual objects, how they interact with each other. And data model guides the implementation of class methods for performing actions such as checking out a book, returning a book, searching for a book by title or author, right? So etc. And you create a functions like you can create a one function reusable method like checkout book or return book. So these can be a functions which are implemented on top of book class, right? To handle maybe borrowing and returning operations, such like that. And so finally testing, right? Testing is conducted to ensure the correctness and reliability of the system in the even in case of object oriented approach. So data models inform the design of test cases for validating object behavior and data integration. So here testers will use this design or the model basically for example, test cases are created to verify that books are properly added to the library collection. Patrons can borrow and return the books without error, and transaction records are accurately updated, right? And finally, maintenance. After deployment, the library management system requires ongoing maintenance, right, to address bugs, implementation enhancements, and also adapt to the changing requirements on the like module, library module. So data model serves as a key reference for understanding the system existing data structures and relationship, and guiding maintenance activities such as database schema modification, performance optimization, and data migrations. So this becomes a dictionary for like which to store what is there in the system, right? And in this example, the data model plays a vital role in guiding the development of library management system using object-oriented approach. So now let's quickly move on for the prototype approach, right? A prototyping approach is again one of the software development approaches where it involves building quick and simplified version of the system to gather feedback and refine requirements. So here prototyping is, as the name says, right? It starts with a prototype, right? And it starts with some initial rough understanding of a product or the requirements. So this kind of projects usually takes place when you don't have the complete visibility of the end result you're looking for. You want to try and test and multiple prototypes, right? Create a multiple prototypes. So here in this case, data model is in prototype approach are often used to define the basic structure of the data that will be used in prototype, allowing stakeholder to visualize. Why basic structure? Because it is not a matured product that we are building at first iteration. So there might be multiple iterations. As we go, the data model will evolve, right? So it starts with a basic structure, right? And so then visualize and interact with the system data early in the development process, right? And here, so there might be certain steps, right? Initial requirement gathering, prototype design, data model development, prototype implementation, testing, evaluation, and iterative refinement. So iterative refinement definitely needed because it is a prototype approach. So there will be multiple iterations. Okay. So again, let's discuss about the example, right? So example of this, like we can prototype for a social media dashboard that aggregates and displays analytics data for from various platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, right? So here in this case, so the initial requirement gathering when you're doing, right, the project conducts initial discussions with the stakeholder to gather high-level requirements for social media dashboard prototype. While the requirements may not be fully defined at this stage, data model can help in visualization and clarifying the underlying data structure. Because prototype, see, when you are working on the prototype, right? So what data models comes in handy to go and explain to the stakeholders what is currently understood, right? And this will clarify the underlying data structure and relationships that a dashboard will need to support, right? For example, data model can be used to define like entities like users, posts, engagements, and their attributes for different social media platform. And prototype design, like based on the initial requirement, the design team can create a prototype for social media dashboard. Data model again plays a crucial role in designing the data visualization components and defining the data source and connections. For instance, the team may use mock data or sample data sets to create wireframes or mock-ups of the dashboard interfaces. So this will help illustrate how different metrics and insight will be displayed and navigated. So and then the data model development, right? So here, as part of prototyping, the team basically what they does is like they use front-end technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and the recent technologies to create user interfaces. And the backend technologies, they can use Python, Node.js, right, to handle data retrieval and processing. So the data model guides the implementation by defining the data structures and relationship that needs to be supported by the backend services. So that's again the data model plays a crucial role there also. And next is the prototype testing and evaluation, right? So once the um, like prototype is developed, it is tested with the potential users or stakeholders to gather the feedback and identify areas of improvement. So data models inform the evaluation process to by helping users understand the underlying data structure and relationship and provide context for interpreting the prototype functionality and their limitations, right? And the finally iterative refinement. So here is the data model evolve along the prototype, because prototype is starts with some assumption or some hypothetical use case, and then it goes on evolving, and then it reflects changes and updates to the underlying data structure and relationships. For example, maybe you start adding the entities or attributes to by adding to the data model and update the data model to support the new feature or insight identified during prototyping and brainstorming, right? So in this particular example, we have seen how data model again plays a crucial role in this particular social media dashboard prototyping. So this is a project which is a prototyping project example, and we saw how data model plays a crucial role in each of these steps. And finally, let's jump to the famous agile method, right? Agile methods, most of you might already know it is like a Scrum or Kanban. So, or there is a variety of permutation and combination people will do, like they say Kanban board is there and Scrumban board is there. So prioritize iterative development, frequent collaboration, and adaptability to the change. So agile, as the name says, right? So it is the main intention here of this software development approach is to make the or a product very agile for any changes. So agile in the sense it should be open for change, but it should not break during that process. So that is where we call it as agile, right? And data model in agile methods are typically lightweight and flexible. So here evolving over the time as a project progresses and as a new insight are gained from the user. So this is very important in the agile when you're talking about, right? So here the data model need to be lightweight and flexible. Why means, so this is agile, right? So anything like whatever you take in the current sprint that you are working, so in the next sprint it might completely change. So your data model should not break with small changes. So it should be designed in such a way that it is lightweight and also flexible for any changes that over the time the project undergoes, right? And so this, like here we have, when we talk of agile methodologies, we have a product backlog refinement. It starts with that, and then we have a sprint planning, executions, daily stand-up meetings will be there, and we'll discuss, and the sprint reviews will be there, and finally we have a sprint retrospective, right? So here, like let's take an example, right? So let's take an example of a project management tool using a Scrum framework, right? So here, like we have product backlog refinement. The development process starts with the creating and prioritizing the items in the product backlog and the data. So I don't know to go in detail about this, but here in the first step, right, data model plays a role in defining and refining these backlog items as they help in identifying the underlying data structure and relationships needed to support each features. For example, backlog item may include user story related to the managing projects, tasks and deadlines and team members, each of which require a specific data model to represent. And also sprint planning, right? So when it comes to sprint planning, so the development team selects here a set of backlog items to work on during the upcoming sprint. Data models inform the planning process by providing insight into the data requirements and dependencies of selected backlog items. For instance, the team may consider the data model for different features and determine how they will integrate with each other within the particular sprint. And then comes sprint execution, right? During the sprint, the development team works on implementing the selected backlog item. Data model guides the development process by serving as a blueprint for designing and implementing the database schema, like object models and data access logic. For example, developers use data models for create tables, defining relationships, and implementing business logic for managing project data within the project management tool. So and again we have a daily stand-up calls where again, like data model may be referred during these meetings to address any issues related to data structure, database query, or data integration tasks. Okay, and then we have a sprint review. So during the sprint review phase, again data model can be crucial or important in reviewing process by providing context for understanding the data structure and relationship implemented in the project management tool. So stakeholders may review the data model to ensure that they align with their expectation and requirements. So that helps there, right? And finally, the sprint retrospective. So here the team holds a sprint retrospective to reflect on sprint process and identify areas of improvement. A data model may be discussed during the retrospective to evaluate their effectiveness in supporting the development effort. For example, the team may discuss whether the data model is adequately addressing the data requirements of the backlog items and whether any adjustments are needed for the future sprints, right? So in this we have seen how in each of these steps like data model plays its own important role, right? So with this, like we have seen different methodologies, software development methodologies, so and how the data model fits in each and every place of the software development lifecycle. So data model whether it doesn't, as we said in the initial of the video, right, it doesn't matter which software development approach you are using, right? So data model will be used in each and every phases of the project. So it is how you leverage the data model and take benefits of it in your project. So hope this was useful, and thanks for watching.